We welcome in Dr. Ben Bishop, formerly of the University of Scranton, esteemed professor, who, as we talked about this story earlier this morning, is a fully vaccinated professor who was fired for violating university vaccination policy. And we'll get the story directly from the source right here this morning. Dr. Bishop, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. First and foremost, I'm sorry to hear about your circumstances. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So we talked about the story this morning. We've also been talking about a story about the University of Notre Dame where they are mandating booster shots for the student body between 18 to 22 years old. So a lot still going on with COVID at these colleges and universities. But let me start with you specifically and give me the Cliff Note version, your side of the story.
Okay. So, my objections to the COVID policy, a lot of that is, what you see with a lot of the people that are objecting to it in terms of bodily autonomy, privacy, things like that. But we have specific parts of the policy, that are kind of unique to higher education and to Scranton. For example, you have things like, is it really ethical to require a vaccine? You have all these unwilling 20-something students, and any vaccine that you put into them, that's some vaccine that you can't give to, an 80-year-old diabetic who maybe actually needs it, but's in a developing country. So, there's some issues with that. And also, at Scranton, they have this policy where they encourage faculty and students to turn in one another because of, some sort of pandemic violations.
That's
and,
just insane.
From my perspective, I'm supposed to be a mentor to my students and, teaching them what their professional ethics should be. And, I just can't get on board with those kind of policies.
No, I can't either.
And so,
I mean, can you explain to me the thing you just mentioned about essentially, the self-policing of others and essentially the tattletaling aspect of this?
Right.
Could you go in further on that for me?
Yeah, so they have a web page, and basically they say, it's everybody's responsibility to make sure we don't have violations of the policy. Use this form, tell us about, maybe your professor was pulling down his mask to take a drink of water, turn him in. So, to me it's crazy. But that's, that form, I checked it right before the show and it's live right now. So this is their policy.
I mean, it's insane. And I've been out of college for 16 years. I graduated in 2006, but in the summer of 2021, I took a shot at law school and they had a mask mandate when I was still living in Nashville, Tennessee at the law school. Despite being vaccinated, you still had to wear a mask. And there were times where I'm sitting there in my intro to contracts class and I'm taking down my mask to drink my coffee. It was night school. And like the person next to me is like staring at me like, you really have your mask down for 12 seconds to take a sip of your coffee?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, actually I do. I'm sorry. From a disclosure of personal medical standpoint, how much does this irk you about having to reveal and release your personal medical decisions to other people?
Yeah, I think it's inappropriate. I mean, so one thing, too, is that the university has been releasing vaccination statistics. So they're using it as a way to, maybe indicate, well, we've got 97% of the employees that are vaccinated, and it's like an endorsement of their policy. I don't want to have my information used to make it seem as though I'm endorsing their policy because I don't agree with that.
Yeah, very interesting. Dr. Ben Bishop, former professor, esteemed professor with really an impeccable academic record at the University of Scranton, is joining us here on Kayal and Company. Fired on August 31st, 2022 for, quote, violating a university vaccination policy despite being, quote, fully vaccinated. You're a very smart individual. I want to pick your brain on this. We talked earlier about a story at Notre Dame University in South Bend, how they're mandating the booster shot now for students at the university, when we've already seen many reports and many medical professionals coming out and saying, look, 18 to 22, you're young, you're healthy, you're in good shape. You probably don't need this newest booster. The science clearly shows you don't need it. So why are universities, and it seems like this is really something that runs rampant in academia these days. Why is this happening? Is it a liability financial thing? Because it clearly doesn't seem to be science driven.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that. One, I think ideology. The professors at universities, you don't see a whole lot of conservatives.
No.
And there's some reasons for that. This past year, I believe that I was the third conservative that was forced out of the university. There were two others before me. So, universities are not all that accepting of dissent these days.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, the people that are making the decisions are not the healthy 20-year-olds. The people that are making the decisions, a lot of times these are administrators, these are professors, that are in different risk categories. Is it sane to be vaccinating all these, healthy 20-year-olds against their will? Maybe not, but some professors that have health issues, maybe it is in their interest. But if they're the ones making the decisions, that may influence it.
So you are one of three that have had to deal with this. So by my math and my logic, you're one of only really three smart people actually at that institution, because you mentioned you were a conservative. So that's good work out of you, Dr. Ben Bishop. But hey, let me ask you this, because you mentioned you are a conservative, and we have talked about this theme on this show for now 7 weeks about all these schools, whether it's higher education down to high school to elementary school, with this left-wing ideology and woke indoctrination. Why do you think the new motto and this new blueprint for liberal-ran institutions are trying to teach people what to think as opposed to how to think?
Yeah, I do think that this is a problem in higher education. I was taking a look at the Twitter post you had and a reply to it that basically said the same thing, the issue with indoctrination in universities. And I do see it as a sort of legitimacy issue for higher education. But, the thing is, you can't get rid of higher education. We're really pretty critical in terms of things like, military technologies, things like that. A country that doesn't have higher education isn't going to be able to defend itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, how is that higher education run? There are issues with, you might say political movements that are sort of masquerading as academic disciplines.
Yep.
And I think that that's a legitimacy issue for higher education.
All right, so to wrap this up, where are you at right now? What is your plan of action? Do you have a legal course of action? Is there a remedy that you can seek? We've seen many stories now, and when it comes to taking, the COVID shot, we've seen these stories about people that have got their jobs back after being fired for not taking a shot because of a mandate. They've been given back pay. Have you pursued an attorney? What is your game plan moving forward here?
Yeah, so we filed a federal lawsuit yesterday, and there's a bunch of claims in that lawsuit. Some of the highlights, this issue with me violating the COVID plan, we actually have evidence in the lawsuit that the provost of the university, that is, the guy that accused me of violating the plan, he also violated the plan. We have pictures of him, without a mask on campus. So it's kind of a bizarre situation. They also, were supposed to have this hearing for me, and they banned me from attending this hearing because of my COVID position. Also banned me from even going in remotely. So it's, those are some of the things that come up in the lawsuit, and we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, you got to love it. Do as I say, not as I do. I love that philosophy from those in charge. Dr. Ben Bishop, best of luck. I'm sorry to hear about your circumstance. I agree with your stance, and I think you'll end up being just fine in the long run. Eventually, sanity will prevail. It just might take some time. So hang in there. Best of luck, and we would love to have you on the road, on the show down the road in the future if things change for you and we have an update on your story.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Ben Bishop joining us.